What's up? Welcome into today's episode of Pushing the Pile. This is the Draft Lab, a weekly series here on CBS Sports Network where we dive into the NFL draft and expect position groups. And with Kyle Long joining the show, former All-Pro offensive lineman, you might think that we're talking about offensive line today, going through the top 10. I'm excited. This is your first toe dip into the scouting world.
Yeah, dude, it's a different world from playing or coaching, getting to show technique. Is getting to watch these guys and getting their entire body of work or a lot of their body of work and trying to figure out who the hell they are. Some guys can show you who they are within the first 2 minutes of film, and I'm sure you can agree with me there. But then some guys can hoodwink you. They can trick you a little bit, show you something in the first 2 minutes that makes you fall in love with them. But if you stick around long enough to make it to the second, third, fourth chapter of their season or their career, your tune can change on a guy. And it was exciting to get to watch these dudes, Mike, and I appreciate you giving me a good list to go through and get my feet wet in this scouting thing. But I've taken a note card's length worth of bullet points for about 20 of these guys.
You want to hold up the watermelon note cards?
Yeah, so my wife, Kate, has great stationery at the house. I don't know if you guys can zoom in on this. Is this my...
Very Florida.
So it's like, very Florida. Our house, very colorful. Yeah. Not a lot of just white walls in there. A lot of color. But with that comes stationery. I've got stationery for all these guys, top offensive linemen, guards, centers, tackles, and I had fun. And one thing I found out, a lot of these guys in this year's draft have that position versatility, like this watermelon note card grocery list. Doesn't just have to be for grocery lists. I can also talk about leverage, angles, screens, frames, all that kind of stuff, and get it on these. But my mom saw that on FaceTime this morning because I was talking to her. It was her birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, Mama Long. She's 30. And she said, I got to get you some note cards because you're going to look like an absolute piece of shit going on there with those watermelons. She's like, the watermelons are fashionable, but for right now, we need note cards. Your old man does note cards.
It is very old school. I've actually never done note cards. I'm of the generation that I've been putting my notes into a Google Sheet since I started doing this in 2015. But I'm excited to hear your takes because I think that when someone gets into the scouting, I love the confetti there for the birthday. When someone gets into the scouting world, it's always like, there's a fresh perspective. You almost like don't know what you don't know. And you having obviously watched offensive line so much your entire career, I'm excited to see what you think translates from college to the NFL because you've primarily obviously focused on NFL pretty much your entire time. But now you're watching college guys really in depth for the first time. And you were telling me, you're like, you can get in, you watch a bunch of plays, you don't have any notes on a guy, and all of a sudden one play, you're like, okay, that's something that, and that's how I feel.
A lot of it just looks like football. Yes. It's like when you're listening to a song and somebody's like, tell me if you like this song or not. And you have to listen to a minute and a half, 2 minutes of it before you can say, no, I don't like this one. Or let's add this to my favorites. It's the same thing here with a lot of these players because obviously if you're at the top of the list, if you're one of these guys that's being studied by Mike and I, you have shown that you can play the game of football. We're trying to figure out who are going to be the studs at the next level, not just guys who can play or project as a tackle or a guard, whatever it may be. I want to know who the dudes are in this thing. And we got to the bottom of some of it, and I just wish we had a fast forward button because I want to see all these guys play in NFL jerseys.
This is why I say every year, week one, what am I looking forward to? I just want to see the rookies. That's all I really care about is because I spent years watching these guys, and then this is the first time you get to really see, and some guys, it's a real sink or swim. Some guys show up, some guys do not early on the season. But before we get to our top 10 offensive line rankings, Kyle's takes on that, we had some big news in the football world. Some big contracts being given out, not to free agents though. These are guys who weren't free agents just yet, and it's two Bengals. Ja'Marr Chase signs the highest deal ever recorded for a non-quarterback, 4 years, $161 million. And T. Higgins, well, he fired his agent a few months ago, hired Ja'Marr Chase's agent, and reportedly said, we're a package deal now. If you want Ja'Marr Chase to resign here, you're going to have to give me the contract I want to. And he gets a 4-year, $115 million extension in his own right. The trio, the triplets in Cincy, well, they're going to be there for the next 4 seasons. And to me, this reminds me of, first thing I thought of was like mid-2000s Colts when they had Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Peyton Manning. They may not have won a lot of Super Bowls. They weren't there at the end of the dance a lot. But when you got that trio, you will be in the dance a lot. You will be in the playoffs, and you'll be fun. And this, to me, was a deal that I always wanted to get done for a guy when I lived in Cincinnati for 8 years. This was the first time they really had excitement for a Bengals team. And it's like when you have this trio, you can have a rotating cast of characters around these guys, If you got Burrow, if you got Chase, if you got T, you're going to have an elite offense, and you're going to be in every single game.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And, I mean, you have to imagine the talking points in and around the league are like, well, we can also pay our good players. Look at Cincinnati. They found a way to make it happen. In a day and age where so many of these good players become so expensive and so valuable, they have to be auctioned off to whoever can afford them.
Okay.
Good on the Cincinnati Bengals for making the most of the talent that they have in-house. The strongest point of their roster is the quarterback. The second strongest is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So they found a way to lock them up. It's a no-brainer. We've been saying that week in, week out.
Had to get it done. Now, Trey Hendrickson, will they get that done? TBD. We're going to have some more takes on this and some takes on Derek Stingley becoming the highest paid cornerback in the NFL coming up right after this. All right, we mentioned the Bengals' big money deals off the top of the show. T. Higgins, 4 years, $115 million. Jamar Chase, 4 years, $161 million. That one, if you're curious, makes him $1 million higher paid than Myles Garrett.
Gotta love that.
All about that if you're the agent negotiating that deal, getting your guy to be the highest paid, even if for a month, the way Myles Garrett was, you always got to do it. But now that turns the attention to Trey Hendrickson because the man was the one-man defense for the Cincinnati Bengals last year, but he's also 30 years old. His deal will not be in the range of T. Higgins. It won't be in the range of Jamar Chase's. I think the number where he's going to come in is going to be very similar to what Danielle Hunter got last year from the Houston Texans. Danielle Hunter was 30 years old, hitting free agency. He got 2 years, $49 million. I think that's the sweet spot for Trey Hendrickson. He's obviously on a $21 million deal this upcoming season, but again, you're thinking the number is going to be somewhere in that $25, $26 million for a couple, maybe 3 years, 75, somewhere in that range. Do they need to get this done if they're Cincinnati Bengals?
Dude, a lot of people lead with age in these conversations. You should lead with production. That red highlighted statistic, 17 and a half sacks. You can't fake production. There's no way that you can go out and try to manufacture that kind of production. 17 and a half sacks for Trey Hendrickson in a damn near losing effort all season for the Cincinnati Bengals. That's a warrior. That's a leader for your defense. He's somebody that can rally the troops. And with that three-headed monster retained on the offensive side of the ball, it's going to be ping pong, back and forth. A lot of passing against this Bengals team. What do you want if you've got a pass? If you've got a pass situation defensively, you want a guy who gets production. 17 and a half sacks. Lead with that in this conversation. I do think they have to get the deal done for Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, the problem is though for the Cincinnati Bengals, and everyone's saying, they didn't make the playoffs last year with T and Jamar, and now T was banged up for a good portion of the year, and you had this weird contract situation looming over for the team. And so if they get it all done, I think you'll have a much better locker room situation going on this upcoming fall, and I think they will make the playoffs should they get all those deals done. But they just got to draft better, man. If you go back and just look, since the Jamar Chase pick, and even literally in that 2021 NFL draft where they went Jack Carman, Joseph Osai, the two picks after that in the top 75, they don't have an impact player since then. They have not drafted one single impact player in the past three drafts. Amarius Mims, TBD, obviously last year, too soon to say, but Miles Murphy, DJ Turner, Jordan Battle the year prior, Dax Hill, Cam Taylor-Britt, Zach Carter the year before that. It's like, that's where they're losing games. That's where they've lost sort of the plot since going to that 2021 Super Bowl. So if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, yeah, you need to get the Trey Hendrickson deal done, but this is a draft that is a crucial draft if you really are going to get back into Super Bowl contention.
It's clear to me that within the Bengals organization there lives two wolves, one of which drafts incredibly good football players and one of which just drafts absolute you-know-whats. And it's unfortunate because some of the most talented guys in the NFL are on the Cincinnati Bengals, and we're still having the conversation about hot seat at the coaching spot there in Cincinnati, whether it's the DC getting fired or their head coach being on the hot seat this coming year. You would love to think that with a guy like Joe Burrow, the offense that they have, and a guy like Trey Hendrickson on the defensive side of the ball, they would be able to fill in some semblance of a winning roster. And I think with some changes schematically on the defensive side of the ball, we could be looking at a more competitive team week in, week out. But at the end of the day, it wasn't Lou's fault. It was the fact that they just didn't have any players on that defensive side of the ball.
I think Duke Tobin, the de facto GM, they don't technically have a GM for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Been there forever.
He fell into the trap that I saw all too often in Green Bay, which is I have Aaron Rodgers. I have Joe Burrow. Of course I'm going to have a good offense. After that 2021 year, they're like, of course we're always going to have a good offense. Let me just get a good defense on the other side of the ball to make this work. and only draft defensive players. The next 2 drafts, all their top 100 picks were defensive players. Even this past year. Yeah, they drafted Maris Mims in the first round, but then Chris Jenkins in the second round. Like, they've gone heavy on defense, but if they would have just rebuilt this offensive line through the draft, if they would have maybe added a
instead
tight end
instead of signing free agents that were left to walk from other teams, like I think about our guy Orlando Brown Jr., who's a good player, a guy who's earned his keep in the NFL. But if you're looking to really up the notch, up the ante a little bit at that position, it's going to be within your own ranks, from within your own ranks. And you look at teams like Philadelphia, that's what they do. They draft well, they develop these young guys. So I'm glad they got Mims, but let's hope that he can develop into the stud that we'd hope he was.
Yes. All right. The other big news, Derek Stingely Jr., number 2 or 3 overall pick way back in 2021, I believe.
Way back in 2021.
2022, excuse me. He now becomes not only the highest paid corner in the NFL, far and away the highest paid cornerback in the NFL, a 3-year, $90 million deal. He's the number 3 overall pick, excuse me, right behind Aiden Hutchinson in that 2022 NFL draft, which ended up, 3 of the top 4 picks in that draft ended up becoming absolute studs. Aiden Hutchinson, Derek Stingely Jr., Sauce Gardner, Sauce yet to be paid. Derek Stingely Jr. gets his bag, 3 years, $90 million, and he reset the market in a big, big way. Prior to this, it was J.C. Horn at 4 years, $100 million, so $25 million a year. This usurps that by a cool $5 million a year. Before this offseason, there was only 5 cornerbacks making $20+ million a year, and now he sets it to 30.
Yeah,
Derek Stingely Jr., worth it, in my opinion.
Definitely. You need these guys in the same sense that you need these pass rushers to be able to defeat these elite tackles and guards, to be able to go get after these team killer quarterbacks. You need a guy on the back end that when the quarterback is not reached by that edge rusher, that can glue somebody up, plaster the nearest defender, make a play when the ball's in the air, have the opportunity to come down with the football. Derek Stingely Jr., 5 interceptions, passes deflected 18. That whole stat line's great. You want guys like this on your back end. There's a reason they pay out the wazoo for these guys. But when you think about the market for this second-level defender, third-level defender market, it's important to point out that some other teams have made some deals at that position. I think about Jalen Johnson with the Chicago Bears, them signing him up for a much cheaper deal, and they still get to match similar type of production. So if you're one of those teams that made a move before this change in the market, you're happy about it. And that's every position in the NFL, this ever-changing financial market.
Yeah, that Jalen Johnson deal at $19 million a year, looking like an absolute steal for the Chicago Bears, and even DJ Moore, like $27 million a year. After T. Higgins breaks that, re-sign your guys, re-sign them early.
Get them quick.
Dallas Cowboys, take some notes. It usually ends up benefiting you. Derek Stingely Jr., though, 7 picks this past year, 5 the year prior. A guy who's been as advertised for the Houston Texans. A no-brainer, especially when, again, they're in that rookie contract window. When you're in the rookie contract window, you make the plays to keep your guys, to get as much talent on that roster as humanly possible. And, well, we'll see what they do.
And why not sign up guys from your own team? Because that builds trust between downstairs and upstairs. When you know you're on a roster that takes care of people, that on their rookie deal they go out there and handle business, you see the light at the end of the tunnel in your career, not as a train, but as an exit and success. It's something to work for. It's a carrot to chase. So a guy like Stingley getting paid sets up well for all the other youngsters in that building who are looking to go break the bank eventually.
And for those Texans fans watching, stay tuned. We got the top 10 offensive line. You may be in the market for one of these guys. And by maybe, I mean you gosh darn better
you will get one of our guys. In the
market for one of these offensive lines. We're going to go through the top 10. Kyle's going to give his takes on who I got too high, who I have too low, and who I have just right, as well as just some general takes on this offensive line class right after this. Welcome back to the Draft Lab here on CBS Sports Network. We're talking O-line with me, Mike Renner, Kyle Long, joining the show. And we're going to go through my top 10, and you're going to give your takes on it. I'm going to run through these guys, give a little explanation for each, and then you're going to tap in and tell me who's too high, who's too low, who's just right. Here it is on the screen. Kelvin Banks Jr., I have met number 1 because to me he's just like the cleanest. Across the board, I poked the fewest holes in his game, I think. I think that guy's just a clean, good offensive tackle at the NFL level. More than enough traits to succeed. I want him on my football team. Armand Membu's not far behind, though. I have these guys very close in my final rankings. Membu is much more of a freak. I think he's a little less polished, I'd say. Just doesn't look as clean on a play-for-play basis, but like when his high-end stuff is higher end than anyone else in this draft class. Unbelievable athlete. Just draft him. He'll go top 10 in my opinion. Will Campbell is after them because I do see him as a guard. We've talked about his wingspan issues.
Tweener.
The fact that he will have the shortest wingspan of any tackle in the NFL if he does play offensive tackle, and that matters. And it's ratioed up against speed at the collegiate level. Tyler Booker I have at 4, the big, brutish offensive guard for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't really worry about his combine numbers. They weren't great. His RAS score, RAS, relative athletic score, not ideal, but it's a guard. And he's a phone booth guard. He's not a zone scheme sort of guard. So it's
just a guard.
It's a guard.
Continue.
Josh Simmons at 5, the Ohio State tackle. Again, injury playing a factor there. Without the injury, if he plays the whole season with the way he looked the first 5 games of the year at Ohio State, man, he could have been 3 on this list for me. I loved his tape, but a patellar tendon tear is a big, big injury. Gray Zabel from North Dakota State comes in at 6. He's a tackle there who's going to play on the interior at the NFL level. Probably your best center. If you're drafting a center in this draft class, it's probably Gray Zabel. Josh Connerly, Oregon tackle. We're at the point where he's the first guy I'm describing as a project. I think every guy before this is a day one starter. I could see Connerly being the first guy where I'm like, maybe he sits year 1, right? Maybe you're drafting him kind of like a Maris Mims last year, where you could start him if you really have to, but I'm probably drafting him, if I am, with a plan that he's a backup day 1. Donovan Jackson, the guard/tackle from Ohio State. Loved his tape at guard, but I think what I saw from him at tackle at the end of the season, I think he could play there. He's got the size, he's got the length, he's got the athleticism to do it. He's number 8 on this list. Charles Grant is the biggest wild card in this draft, in my opinion, on the offensive line. The best athlete of any guy. The guy moves easier than anyone else out of William & Mary, but we didn't get to see him at Senior Bowl, didn't get to see him at the Combine. If he would have had that, if he would have been healthy for those, I think a lot more people would know this guy's name than they do right now. And then Wyatt Milam comes in at number 10. We're going to discuss him here in a little bit because we both are fans of his game. But offensive tackle turned guard. He will be a guard, in my opinion, or a center at the next level. So give me your takes, Kyle. I'm very excited to hear these. Who's too high? Who's too low? Who's just right? Just what do you got for me?
So I think we're going to start with the too high, and I'm going to put Kelvin Banks. And just because you said, first off, I love the list. There's not much I disagree with, but we were asked by our producers to do too high, too low, just right, which is a game that I enjoy playing. And just because I like being a contrarian, I'm going to say your number 1 guy is too high. You said he's the guy that you can poke the least amount of holes in his game. And while I appreciate that, and everything he did at Texas, I do think he's a great football player, and I'll get to his game in a second. The too low player is going to be Wyatt Milam. Okay? Wyatt Milam, West Virginia. His position, dog. Ass kicker. And just right is Charles Grant. And he's down there at the bottom of your top 10 list. But I think
not a lot of top 10s.
With the fact that he has such positional versatility, he hasn't had the opportunity to week in, week out play against the best of the best. I think the room and the opportunity for growth is huge for Charles Grant. And I think his athleticism, the proof's in the pudding with guys like Lane Johnson, who can run effortlessly, move laterally with great efficiency, get away from the line of scrimmage at will. That's what Charles Grant has. And you said guard, tackle, wherever. And there's a lot of these guys in the draft that are going to be coming out that can play a lot of positions. But we're going to start with Kelvin Banks here. I'll go down the list. I've got my note cards on the watermelon stationery. I'm just going to tell you some of the things that I wrote down that jumped off the film. For Kelvin Banks, great balance in the run game. That's what I wrote first.
Yes.
Really plus pulling inside. A lot of guys, they look lost in there. They don't know the best way to get their body into the A, B, or C gaps or trapping across the formation. This guy, Kelvin Banks, is under control. He understands leverage. He understands what's going on out there. Great leverage and angles at the second level and screens. He's 6'4", I wrote as one of my bullet points. I don't know what I was thinking in that very moment, but I was writing his height down. He plays a quiet game, which to me might be why I have him as too high, because there was nothing that was extraordinary about him, but he's just out there getting the job done. Ryan Clady was a guy that played and protected Jay Cutler before I got into the league, and Jay always talked about watching Ryan Clady, and he said it was the most boring game he'd ever watched. Guys would just go out there and they'd get lost in him. He'd find a way to tactically put him down. Nothing too explosive, nothing too flashy. That's this Kelvin Banks fellow. Great play strength, great anchor. Guys get lost in his his chest, and he has a feel for the outside hand strike. One thing that we're going to talk about is independent hand usage versus two-hand striking. This is a guy who understands where to place that outside hand, protects his inside with the inside hand. I love that. The concerns, leans in the run and pass at times. You saw him get push-pulled a couple times.
Yes.
You saw the same thing?
He's his biggest thing. He's his biggest worry, in my opinion.
Push-pull. That's that waist bend. Once you figure out how to put your... I'm going to say this because we're talking O-line. Once you figure out how to put your balls on somebody, that means get your hips to a guy and not be a waist bend. When you waist bend, your butt goes out, your head goes forward, and then what's coming at you can yank you down to the ground. When Kelvin Banks figures out how to put his balls on some guys, no offense to any of our listeners who are offended by that, it's going to be a lot better for his game. Good TE and ET recognition, and then I wrote, he may be a lefty. I think that outside hand came up again in film, and I was like, this guy may just be left-handed and throws a great left straight.
I'll say this about that balance concern, and I agree wholeheartedly, and that's been like the biggest. You just read other scouting reports. That's what people highlight the most, and he does, especially in the running game, in like a phone booth, get swam otherwise, and like it's out over his toes. But why I'm not super worried about it and why I think it's more technical than just innate poor balance is like when I see him on the move. You mentioned him pulling, just out in the move on screens, him like sifting between different assignments.
That's a feel thing.
That to me is like real athletic balance, is the guy that can change directions and never lose balance. And so I think it's more of a technical, once he learns to not be so out over his toes in the running game or in pass pro and sit back on his haunches more, it's not an innate lack of balance. It's just technique thing. So that's
and he'll definitely figure all this stuff out. And when you talk about guys in space, I weigh that more like when a guy shows balance in space, middle or end of the drive, particularly on these tunnel screens where you've got to go inside the defensive end and peel left at a 45-degree angle or a 90-degree angle down the sideline. When you can show balance and have a good plan there, it speaks volumes about not only your conditioning, because you've been run blocking, pass blocking the last 6 plays, and then they tell you to go run your fat ass out there and block the cornerback. That's hard. That's one of the hardest play calls to hear in the huddle, because it's like, oh, we're running Raptor or Laker again. Like, are you kidding me? I'm beat. Well, this guy can do it, and he looks relatively simple and easy doing it. The second guy, Armand, is it Membo or Mem?
I've been saying Membu.
Membu. I'll stick with Membu. All I wrote, the first thing I wrote, all caps, love him. Wholly strong, seems like he has real fast twitch traits and explosive strength. I watched him play against UGA, and it looked like an NFL game out there. It looked like that level of physicality. This is a guy, unlike Charles Grant, who has played against all these top-tier players. The thing that stood out to me about Membu is he has multiple types of pass sets. He has a mixed bag of technical abilities to get different jobs done, whether it's a wide 9, tight 5, a 7 technique. Does he have a tight end next to him? Does he have a running back with him in protection? Is the guard going to be in his hip pocket? This guy can hit you with vertical set. He can do that play action quick, get on you quick. I'm going to run block you in the pass. He does a 45-degree set, which is great. Clearly, somebody taught this guy, coached him up young, and it stuck to him. So, in my opinion, he has the freak, twitch, explosive, and strength, but he's also got that mental to go along with it. He has a tendency to open the gate on his vertical set. So, when I say open the gate, that means, I'm going to actually stand up for this one. I'm going to take off my IFB. So,
narrate.
When you see an offensive tackle go with the vertical set, I'm just going with this leg. I'm going straight back. This is for a wide rusher that's outside of me. This is if I have maybe a blitzing linebacker at the second level that's creeping up to the line of scrimmage. He may be the guy that comes, and this guy may drop out. So I have to stay here with my pressure key, hand. If anything comes, I take it over. But I also have to maintain visibility key for him. The only way you can keep your strength is if you stay square. When you see guys open up for these edge rushers, that's when you become a bull candidate. That's when the bull rush starts to come into place. They can work outside to underneath, and I see that, unless he cleans it up, being an issue. But none of these guys are without issues.
That was Andrew Thomas, rookie year, New York Giants. awful at that. Yeah, he just had a terrible habit of doing that, and he got his ass kicked.
It's something that happened to me too.
Figured it out.
When I got a 5 or a 4-eye when I was a guard, they'd kick out to 5 technique. So Seattle did it with Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett.
Yeah.
They'd both line up outside the offensive tackle, and they'd force both the right guard and the right tackle to take a tackle vertical set. And if you're not on your P's and Q's, you're in trouble. So Membu gets great depth in his set versus Texas A&M. He handled all comers. UGA felt like an NFL game. Dense play side double team, and his eyes are right. So those are the last bit of notes I had on him. Freak show. This guy's only to get better.
20 years old. 20 years old.
Stud.
And I'll say this, the track record of offensive linemen whose tape's good, but then they also have elite traits. It's just a good track record. It's a good track record. Give a quick take on Will Campbell, and then we're going to get to break and get to
Sorry.
Get through the last 7 here real quick.
Will Campbell, there's a handful of athletes that can excel at any and all positions on the O-line in this league. Will Campbell is one of them. Fantastic ability to lower his center of gravity and understanding of force through the ground, which means being grounded through your feet and being able to develop strength in pass and run. Could be a year 1 Pro Bowl type guard and more than serviceable tackle early in his career, even with the concerns about his length. Plays like a Harry Heastan prospect. That's what I wrote, which is the ultimate sign of respect for a football player to say that he plays like Heastan taught him. Knuckles up, puncher, strikes with his knuckles up, run and pass. Love that. He's a leader. We've all heard him speak at the podium. He says you could be working at Amazon tomorrow if you don't get your guy blocked. He's honest. You need a little bit of that. It seems like he's from the old CBA.
He's a real sneaky 320 too. I mean, he looks on tape trim, but then when he locks in on guys, like he's got some juice behind him.
I also wrote the coaches may call him Gumby because of his ability to just bend. You see him take on bull rushes and recover from really shitty situations as an offensive lineman and out-athlete the situation with flexibility and bend. You can't coach that. Can't teach that.
All right. We're going to get through some notes on some more of the guys in the top 10 after this, as well as what Kyle and I look for when scouting offensive linemen. Coming up right after this. All right, we're back here on the Draft Lab talking all things 2025 offensive line class. Tackles, guards. To me, not a great interior offensive line class.
Because they're all playing tackle.
Because they're all playing tackle. Exactly. If you want an interior offensive lineman, if you want a guard, if you want to set in this draft class, draft a tackle and just put him there. Honestly, with the way guards are getting paid at this point in time, I don't think a lot of these tackles were complaining too hard. But we're going to talk about what we like to see from these collegiate offensive linemen. Basically, how do we get to the top 10 list that you just saw last block? How do we...
So if you texted me the other day, you were like, we're going to be talking O-line. Like, give me what you consider to be the 6 or 8 traits you look for in an offensive lineman. And I immediately sent you 8. Like,
yeah, it was quick.
Immediate. And the list goes as follows: balance, explosion, finish, technique, anchor, understanding of leverage, recovery, and play strength. And none of those are going to be in order, but you know, a word that we keep talking about is balance. And balance shows up in so many different ways on the offensive line, whether you're engaged with a rusher or whether you're drive blocking a 3 technique, backside or front side. Your ability to stay off the ground, that's one thing I think about it as balance.
I look for that all.
The way that we talked about Kelvin Banks being able to get out and block outside the numbers and getting on these smaller guys, that's balance. I mean, to be able to work out there at 320 pounds plus and to be able to shift and move around with these smaller guys. And then the ability to pull up underneath, that's balance as well. But one thing that stands out to me is sometimes when guys do fall, how they get up, how they recover, how they keep their momentum going in one direction. Because a bowling ball isn't supposed to stop. It's supposed to keep moving, knock anything over in its path. Well, this guy Booker from Alabama, I could talk about him all day. The first note I have is very large human. But one thing that I wrote is pancake into flip versus Ole Miss was one of the most impressive things I saw today.
Do a barrel roll. The barrel roll post pancake is an elite trait.
Pancake into barrel roll, landing on the feet. This gentleman here is he changes the gravitational pull of the universe. That's how big he is. And he's like got one of those frames where you look at him and you say he could either be 6'1", 300 pounds, or 6'5", 350. And he it's all the same look.
So well put together.
Compact, dense, strong, low center of gravity, but still big, big, big. We talked about all these traits. We got through balance. The other one is explosion. Obviously, Membu, the guy that I've fallen in love with, explosive. Just watch him run the 40-yard dash. Finish, Wyatt Milam that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Finish. Okay. Technique.
Can you explain a little bit for the audience, what do you mean by finish?
Well, finish, go put on the Kansas City Chiefs from the last 3 years and go watch their interior 3 offensive linemen, particularly Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. They want to make people not love the game of football through their sheer will, determination, and ability and willingness to finish, okay? Creed Humphrey talks about taking guys to the salt mines. This is a salt mine game. We're going to find out how bad they want it. Well, play in, play out. Go put the tape on. Creed's trying, he's blocking a second level defender. Maybe the whistle blows and it's that extra, or it's that triple extension that you see Trey Smith go for where he puts life and limb on the line to be able to get somebody on the ground.
Yep.
That stuff matters. There's a lot of these guys here that do it. Tyler Booker loves to finish people. Wyatt finishes people. That's huge. Finish tells me a lot about who you are as a football player. Technique, obviously all encompassing technique. It's like the holy grail. If you're a guy that's technically sound, you can be like Kelvin at the top of the list and just be boring and force people like me to try to pick something apart about you.
I'm going to throw one thing in on the technique side, because what I look for, yes, technique. Having a guy who uses hands well in unison, great. But I also like guys who, if they don't have technique, if they're not well coached up, because coaching at the collegiate level, if you're watching college, very hit or miss, yes. Is a guy still gets the job done, still finds ways.
Yes.
If a guy finds ways and has bad technique, I remember Tyler Smith coming out of Tulsa. I'm like, he has no clue what he's doing, but he finds ways. I like guys that find ways, because if once you give them technique, they'll find even better ways. So go ahead.
I mean, that's a great point. If you have a will, there is a way. It's just not many people willing to do what it is to win the day. And guys like Tyler Smith, the cream rises to the top. And then I wrote anchor, the ability. Okay, so when I was at junior college, Saddleback College, shout out the Bobcats. They used to be the Gauchos, but I think that got nixed. We had a gentleman by the name of Jackie Slater come and talk to our offensive line. Jackie Slater, Hall of Fame offensive tackle, used to put my dad in a hamster cage. Jackie gave us a couple pieces of advice, and he led with move laterally with great efficiency and give ground grudgingly. And that give ground grudgingly part is what we're talking about when we say anchor, the ability to just throw the anchor in the ground and stop whatever's coming at you. I think that anchor is huge, and you can maintain the integrity, the depth of the pocket. You don't want that thing closing up on your quarterback. You don't want to end up on your other guard's leg, any of that stuff. Anchor comes into play big time there. Run or pass, because you're not always the guy who gets the best jolt off the line of scrimmage. Sometimes that 3 technique gets up under your face mask and buckles that spine of yours, and you have to make a decision physically. I'm going to put my foot in the ground and drive this guy off the line of scrimmage. Anchor comes into play, both run and pass. Leverage, the understanding of leverage, not only with pad level, center of gravity, all that good stuff, fitting your hands in the right place. And if you have them in the wrong spot, if you see a guy getting bull rushed and they just have their hands on top of the defender's hands, they're in big trouble. But you see some of these guys fight to get that leverage. They swing the hands back up underneath and they can just brace and sit down on it. Jari Evans was the guy that I remember when I was coming into the league that could just stonewall anybody's bull rush. Even if they got their hands inside, he could refit and win the rep. So leverage, huge. Run and pass. Recovery. We talked about Will Campbell being Gumby. His ability to get beat early in the rep and finish to win the rep. You know, you don't always write the end of the book in the very first page. And sometimes these defensive ends, these 3 techniques get a better jump than you off the line of scrimmage. You just got to find a way to get it done, preferably on the high side of the pocket. And that's what some of these great players do, recover. And then play strength. Obviously, play strength speaks for itself. I love that. And if I were to throw a 9th on there, I wrote FBI, football intelligence. You remember Quentin Nelson coming out. Everybody loved Quentin Nelson because he was kicking everybody's ass at the line of scrimmage, but it's what he did when he was uncovered that was really the most heralded part of his game, his ability to cross formation, take on a blitzer that wasn't even his assignment. These are the things that you deal with as an offensive lineman. You can make or break drives, win or lose games with your ability to be intelligent as a football player and not a robot. We're looking for that too.
I will just say, so those are all 100% agree with all those, but just where, if I'm, hierarchy, if I'm putting these up in order of importance, I trend towards guys, one, body control balance. That's like non-negotiable. You have to be able to operate in space. You have to be able to be in control of your body at all times, not be on the ground. It's hard to block on the ground. The guys that aren't falling flat in the face, those are the ones I trend towards. The guys who are urgent with their hands. They don't have to have the best technique, but the guys who are going quickly, who are being able to play quickly and still be under control, I trend towards those guys. And then just, if I'm going for, play strength versus athleticism, give me the guy that can move his feet.
Yep.
I can get a guy stronger. I can't get a guy moving his feet faster. So I trend towards the guys who can move their feet, the guys who have good body control, and the guys who are urgent with their technique. Those are the ones that, if I'm going for an archetype, I'll trend towards those guys. But it's always a balance. All the things matter.
And there's 32 teams. There's 32 different offensive line coaches that have different schemes, but also some offensive line coaches, it's like those dating shows where they cover up the person, they put a silhouette up, and they ask them 3 questions, and they figure out, well, if there's some O-line coaches that will block off the top half of players, just look at the bottom half. They're looking at butts, calves, and ankles. Some guys are like, ankles are too skinny. Some guys are like, ankles are too fat. Some guys are like, I bet this guy's got cinder blocks for feet. To your point, some of these guys are like, I can teach strength through technique and all that stuff. But some people are just born in an archetype that's not conducive to success. And that's how some coaches think. But then some guys are like Andy Heck and Stoutland in Philly. And they're like, bring me all offensive linemen and I will make them better.
Yep. All right. Speaking of, we're going to talk about the best of the best in this draft class, the superlatives for all the traits, or some of the traits, I guess, that we just talked about for these offensive linemen. We're going to give who's the best at each in the draft class right after this. Now, we talked about the draft class, 2025 NFL offensive line class, guards, tackles, centers.
We could talk forever, though.
We could. This. I mean, an hour is not enough, let's be real. But we're going to get to the best of the best. Who has the best at each of the traits we discussed in the last block? Balance, explosion, hands, anchor, strength, agility. I'm going to start with an NFL list just to give you guys kind of maybe a preview of what we're talking about. Maybe this won't help you at all, but I'm just going to do it. Balance. Lane Johnson, I think, is the GOAT in this.
Lane I'm not sure every one of these.
He truly could be everyone, but I'm not sure I've ever seen him on the ground. Explosion, Penei Sewell, his ability to unlock his hips into contact is why he is the best run blocking right tackle in the NFL. Hands, Creed Humphrey, the guy does not let people off his
wrestler.
He gets you. When he gets his hands on you, the block is done. Anchor, Tristan Wirfs. That's why he might be the best pass protecting LT in the NFL right now.
Maybe agility, Tristan Wirfs, too.
Could be. I mean, truly special athlete. Some of these guys are. I mean, like in his prime, Trent Williams was just, again, all of these. Strength, Jordan Mailata, just because 365 pounds of human being coming at you is a lot to deal with. And agility, Zach Tom, the guy is a freakish athlete side to side. It's why he shut down TJ Watt in their one-on-one matchup this past fall. All that being said, here's what I have in the draft class. Balance. It's a guy we haven't talked about. We might have to a little bit.
I'd be balanced if I was 4 feet tall as
exactly.
well.
Willie Lampkin, if you haven't heard of this guy, he's North Carolina guard. Probably going to be a center at the next level because, well, he's 5'10".
It's like trying to flip over the home plate,
270 pounds, but he's unbelievable.
Get your fingers under there.
Go watch his highlights. Go search his name on X.
He's a
and
beast.
Watch a few clips. Unbelievable, this guy.
Willie, we love you here.
I'm a big fan.
I'm making fun because you're probably used to being made fun of at 5'10", 270. But one thing I'm not doing is trying to get in your grill because you seem like you can cook up a nasty right-left combo.
I've never even gone to bat for a 6-foot offensive lineman translating from college to the NFL. And I will swear on my life that he is going to be a starting NFL center, Willie Lampkin, because of his balance and his leverage. 5'10 and a half, he wins every leverage battle. Explosion, Armand Membu. This guy, different animal. We've talked about him. Hands, Gray Zabel. What he was able to do at the Senior Bowl on having never played center.
That was a hand clinic.
Was a clinic. clinic. Anchor, Tyler Booker, another guy who he sits down on bull rushes, and that pocket's going to be cleaned if you draft Tyler Booker. Strength, Armand Membu. Agility, Charles Grant, the William & Mary tackle. Truly a freaky. I mean, it reminds me of like Tron Armstead coming out of.
Whoa.
I mean, just like he's an athlete coming out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, where he's just.
I was going to say Bethune-Cookman, but yeah, it was Arkansas Pine Bluff.
Different caliber of all around. Just guys at that size rarely move the way he does. So that's my list. Who do you got for your list here?
So that's a great list. And I actually saw your list before I made my list, so I didn't want to just like copy wholesale.
No, I like to put different names.
But the ones that I have here are, they're there for a reason. Balance is Wyatt. I mean, I love his ability to turn a double team into a climb at the second level. His understanding of real estate as it pertains to so many feet at the line of scrimmage. You rarely see this guy on the ground. His ability to get in and out of those tight spaces, get on second level defenders
and
is
you really
big.
see his balance like when he's engaged.
Yeah.
Guys try to throw him off, and all of a sudden he's still like.
That's amazing
core hanging on.
Strength.
Yeah.
Okay, what that is just having a trunk, in that core that is unshakable, which is why I think core is the most important muscle group.
I've been doing solid core. I agree.
So you look great.
Thank you.
By the way, it's unfortunate the camera's not on
wedding
you.
weight.
So Explosion, Membu.
Yeah.
And then I wrote, just watch him run, LOL.
Yeah.
Turn the audio up as well for a good one. ASMR, Membu 40.
It might sound like a tennis match.
Hands, Will Campbell. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I love about his hands is the fact that he goes knuckles up. So if you're standing in the doorway and your buddy slams the door at you, how are you going to stop the door? Are you going to put your fingers up or are you going to put them out? Stop the door.
Out.
When you think of O-lineman, you think of thumbs up, right?
More powerful. Feels
People think thumbs up with O-linemen, but it's this. This is what he does. Boom! He just bang, stopping anything. It's like Iron Man. Whoof, whoof, whoof. That's what he does the whole game, and it's boring.
Bench press like that.
So that's Will Campbell hands. Anchor, Donovan Jackson. Not only lower half, but hand refitting is big with him. Great understanding of that. It's a drill that Andy Heck works through every day when you're starting to get bull rush, when they've got your hands and they're lifting your hands to the sky. I'm talking about them. They're the defensive line. When they're pushing you, when they can pry you open, refitting those hands back underneath, that's Hamilton. A big part. It's the Hamilton tech. Look at you, dude. You listen to a lot of Mitch Schwartz?
I mean, he's the GOAT.
That's like Mitchell Schwartz. Shout out to Mitch. So Anchor. And then I'm going to go to strength. Tyler Booker.
Yeah.
This guy is just built like. So I
debated this one hard.
I saw you could debate this one.
No, I mean I put Membu, but Tyler Booker.
I mean those two. It's like the Thing and the Hulk having a fight in a Marvel movie. Okay, it's just a lot of destruction. And I saw this meme. It's right here. If you can go to my solo cam, it says. It's a meme with just a giant. It says, "Tom, you just won a giant tungsten cube." This is essentially what Membu and Tyler Booker are. They're just giant Minecraft blocks that are out there playing football.
Crazy thing about Membu and Booker, they're both 20 years old. These are young cats coming out.
So much money.
I think these guys are going to go higher than people
Membu's
expect.
going to make $1 billion in the NFL.
I think Membu could go as high as 4. I think Booker could go top 12. I think those top 4 offensive linemen in my top 10 list will be coveted. You watch what happened in the Super Bowl. People will be like, I don't care if I have other needs. If I have one need on the offensive line, I want one of these guys because they will, maybe not year one, but in time, they will figure it out.
And then I've got Josh Simmons without the injury as my agility guy. Is it agility or is it speed?
Agility, yeah. He's so smooth side to side.
He's smooth. I mean, it's a guy who understands movement. And it's like when you do these drills as offensive linemen, when you're over there doing individual drills, it's obvious that there's a hierarchy within every offensive line room. If you were to take all these guys and put them together and put them in the drill, I would say that Josh Simmons probably does the drills with the most ease and effortless nature. That's just what he is. I hope that he can recover because what I saw from when he was healthy was really good. Yeah, you'll get a starter if he does recover. I feel very confident saying that. All right, that's our offensive line show. Thanks so much to Kyle Long. Thanks so much for you guys for tuning in. We'll have Kyle back for defensive line at some point when we do DT, D ends. Until then, hate those guys.
Keep pushing.